Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna to all of you. Thank you so much for joining. We are starting a new chapter today, which is chapter number 15, the Yoga of the Supreme Person. Text number 1. Shri Bhagavano Vacha Urdhva Moolam Adaha Shakham Ashvatham Prahur Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavid. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas." Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So once again, Hare Krishna to all of you, and thank you so much for joining. This chapter is actually a very technical chapter, and it is called the Yoga of the Supreme Person. And it's also entitled Purushottam Yoga. Purusha Uttama, Purushottama. Topmost Purusha is, of course, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. So when we take on the knowledge from this chapter 15, Yoga of the Supreme, we will be able to understand how we can conquer the weakness of our heart. Now, Krishna is talking about a reflection of a tree. Now, when we stand, near the water, say on the beach, not on the beach, on the near a river or something, and there is a big tree, and if we look in the water, we will see the reflection of the tree, but it shows inverted. The roots are up and the branches are down. So Krishna is trying to explain to Arjuna that this material world is the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. It is upside down. So where if the tree is upside down, we can see that the roots are up and the branches are down. Now we'll see that in this chapter, verse 1 through 5, Krishna is talking about how one can become detached from this material world, how one can become qualified to go to the spiritual world. Then verses 6 onwards till about 11, he gives the description of the spiritual world. You see, if, say, supposing, I'm told that it's time for, say, my boss says you have to go on a trip to Hawaii. Now, for me to go there, it is important that I have some knowledge about that place. What does that place look like? How do I reach there, etc.? So here, if Krishna is giving us instructions how to go to the spiritual world, then he's also giving us knowledge about the spiritual world. What does it look like? What do you find over there? And then verses 12 through 15, again, Krishna stresses that he is the super soul within the heart of all living entities and how he's maintaining this whole creation. Then verses 16 through 20, we will see Krishna will talk about the essence of the Vedanta Sutra. He's going to talk about the Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Sambandha, of course, is relationship, right? So he's going to talk about that, how one can get attached to Krishna and how one can become qualified to go back to Godhead. Now, this knowledge that he's going to give, he tells Arjuna, it's the highest secret knowledge. Now, in the very last verse of this chapter, we will see Krishna will explain to Arjuna about how we came into this material world, how we can, now that we are here in this material world, how we can conquer our weakness of heart, basically to understand what is that weak point. The weak point that holds us back in this material world is that we have the desire to be the Lord. We want to control. We want to be the Lord of all that we survey. We want to lord it over everyone. If we see, even in the families, we want to, lord it over, like boss over, family members, relatives, friends, colleagues, whoever it may be. So that is something we need to understand, that we are not the Lord of all we survey. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has explained to us, Jivera Swarup hoy, Krishnera Nityadas. Excuse me. The constitutional position of the Jiva, of the spirit soul, is he is the eternal servant of Krishna. So here, Krishna is giving knowledge about the banyan tree. We have seen banyan trees, right? Banyan tree is really huge. It has so many roots spread all over, so many branches that are intertwined, and it is such a huge tree. So banyan tree actually is called Ashwatha. Shwa means tomorrow. Ashwa means not tomorrow. So stha means stay. So what is the meaning of Ashwatha? That which will not exist tomorrow. So Krishna is comparing this material world to Ashwatha, which means it is temporary. It will not stay tomorrow. And that is why he's comparing the big banyan tree to this material world. Now, this verse 1 that we recited is explaining that the banyan tree is upside down and it only reflects the reality. Reality is the spiritual world, whereas the material world is just a reflection. In fact, it is the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Now, just like the reflection, it rests on water, right? When we look at the water, we are looking at the reflection, and the reflection is resting on the water. So similarly, this tree, this banyan tree, is resting upon our desires. We have these unlimited desires that we want to be fulfilled. And of course, most are not fulfilled, and that leads to frustration. So Krishna is explaining that this banyan tree is actually entanglement in this material world. It's, when people, they continue to perform fruitive work, then there is no end to the tree. What is the fruitive work? We perform some actions and we want to enjoy the fruits of those actions. So that is called fruitive work, and that's entangling. You see, excuse me, every action has a reaction, whether it is good or bad. But if we start performing actions in the consciousness of enjoying the fruits, then that becomes like a bondage. And the branches of the tree is producing offshoots, right? When we look at the tree, we see the branches are banyan tree branches. They are producing offshoots. So these offshoots, they grow down into the trunks and the roots, right? Have you seen the banyan tree? It'll go down again and again in the mud. It's going to again, you will see that the roots and the trunks, they all grow down. So this reflected tree, Krishna is explaining that it is endless and it is complicated. Just like we see banyan tree is intertwined, the trunks, the roots, the branches, you see them all together. I remember I had gone on a trip with my son, and we had he showed me a huge banyan tree. It was so amazing. I don't remember the place we had gone to. It's a very popular place, and it is popular for this banyan tree that is so huge. So we see that this banyan tree, everything is intertwined, the trunks, the roots, the branches, everything. So when we do this karma, when we do this fruitive work, then what happens? It leads to bondage. We get attached. And when that attachment gets very, very strong, then our heart starts becoming weak. Why? Because then we get so involved in our desires, in fulfilling our desires. And in the process, just like this material world Krishna is talking about, then we start moving. You have the banyan tree, and then there are so many branches, just like a bird moves from one branch to another, to another, to another. Similarly, that is what we do. We take on different bodies, from one body to another, which means we keep circulating here in this material world in different bodies. So Krishna is talking about how we have to detach ourselves and go to a place where there is no misery, where there is permanent happiness. The verse that we read today, it's talking about that this material world is temporary. That's why it's called ashwatha. That means banyan. Ashwatha means that which is not there tomorrow. Now it's very difficult to understand what is the beginning and what is the end of this tree. Now, as I mentioned when I started this class, that this chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita is a very technical chapter, but it gives us an idea, some knowledge where we can try to understand why we are getting entangled, how to come out of this bondage, and how not to remain entrapped. You see, in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, that the conditioned soul is entrapped in this body. So we are spirit souls, but we are in this body because we are conditioned. Our consciousness is conditioned. We only are thinking about this body, how to satisfy this body, how to fulfill all my desires. And in the process, we forget the spirit soul. That is the real us. And we forget to feed the soul. So with this knowledge, we understand how we should not get enamored by the fruits of this tree. In other words, by enjoying this material world. And if one is interested in liberation, then Krishna says one has to understand this banyan tree. Now it's very complicated. Just like Krishna says this banyan tree is actually a perverted reflection. You see, when you see a reflection in the water, it is inward, it's perverted, it's opposite, so the roots of the tree are up and the branches are down. And now Krishna in chapter 3 has already given us the process how we can come out of this bondage, how we can get liberated while in this body, how the soul can come out of this trap of this material body. He says, Yagnarthat karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tad artham karma kantaya mukta sangaha samachara. Mukta means liberation. So he says, when work is done as a sacrifice unto the Lord, which means we sacrifice the fruits of our actions. In other words, we perform a karma, which is we work according to the scriptures given to us. We follow the laws of the Supreme Lord, and we do not desire to enjoy the fruits of our activities. Then the result will be we will not get entangled. So there will be no good reaction, no bad reaction. There's going to be no reaction. That would mean that we will become detached, we will become liberated. So how do we work for Krishna? The very first thing that we can do, which is very simple, very easy, is to perform meditation. Mantra, meditation. Man means mind, tra means to free the mind. So if we do the meditation of that mantra, which frees the mind of all anxieties, all frustrations, whatever it may be, then we come to a stage where our heart starts getting purified. When the heart starts getting purified, then the consciousness also gets purified. And then we start getting detached. Now, detachment doesn't mean there is no affection. There is definitely affection, but there is no attachment. Now, for us, to be detached, it's important that we look at the positive side, which is we get attached to something. When we get attached to something, then naturally we will get detached from something else, right? So the mantra meditation helps us to get attached to the Supreme Lord, and then gradually we get detached from the material world. And of course, that requires constant practice. Now, this banyan tree that Krishna is talking about, he says, the leaves of the tree, they are like the hymns of the Vedas. And these hymns of the Vedas, when chanted, can elevate us, can elevate our consciousness. Then he says that the roots that are growing upwards. You see, when you see the reflection of a tree, now the tree is standing here, actual tree, the roots are down and the leaves are, branches are up. But when it is a reflection, it's upside down. The roots are up and the branches are down. So he says that the roots are growing upwards. Why? Because the highest material planet, which is Brahmaloka, is upwards. And from there, the whole universe expands. So these branches of the tree, they are like the planetary systems, different planetary systems. And the fruits of the tree, the fruits that are there on the tree, they are actually the results of our activities. So Krishna says that the reflection of this tree, it is situated on the desire. Just like the reflection is on the water, similarly, everything is resting upon our desires. So we have the, you can say, freedom of choice of what we desire. Now, if we want to end this cycle of birth and death, we go through this cycle of birth, disease, old age, and death, and then we are born again and again, disease, old age, and death. So the cycle is going on and on and on since time immemorial. Now, if we want to stop this cycle, then Krishna is telling Arjuna that we need to cut this tree. We need to know, to be able to cut this tree, we need to know, understand this tree. We need to analyze each part of this tree. We need to analyze, about our desires. What kind of desires do we have? Where are they coming from? You see, when the desire comes and when the mind contemplates on those desires, then that leads to actions. You see, and every action has a reaction. So we need to meditate on what kind of desires do we have. So if we really want to cut this tree, then it's important to have this knowledge of the tree. Now, once we see let me give you an example. Say there is a mirror, and I look at myself, I look at the reflection in the mirror, right? But once I remove the mirror, I'm still there, right? I'm looking at the mirror, I'm looking at the reflection in the mirror, but when I remove the mirror, I am still there. Only the reflection is gone, right? The reflection is temporary. I am permanent, as you can see right now. So similarly, the reflection is the temporary material world, but the person, which is the spiritual world, is still there. So there is spiritual world and there is the material world, which is a reflection. The reflection is gone, but the spiritual world actually still remains. So to be able to, as I told you, it's a very technical chapter where Krishna is describing to Arjuna about the whole banyan tree. But the whole sum and substance of it is to understand how to conquer the weakness of heart, because the heart is full of desires. Now, there's nothing wrong in having desires, but then we need to understand what these desires lead us to, right? What is the end result of these desires? Just like in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, we see that Arjuna is very confused. He says, I don't know what is right, what is wrong. I don't know what is my duty. What am I supposed to do? So in all that confusion, that is when he approaches Krishna to guide him as a teacher, as a spiritual teacher. So Krishna is explaining to Arjuna step by step that even though we living entities have minute independence or a freedom of choice, we have to be very careful how we utilize this freedom of choice. Now, I'm sure from experience you would have noticed that desires are unlimited. When these desires come about, we start working on fulfilling those desires, and we have also experienced not all desires get fulfilled, right? And we have also experienced that the material desires that do get fulfilled doesn't really give much satisfaction. I'll give you an example. That, say, a new iPhone is out in the market in the Apple store, and I have a desire to get that new iPhone. So I go, I get the new iPhone, and after a while, when I hear that a better model has come out, I'm not satisfied anymore. Now I want the next model. So that desire to get that new iPhone was not very satisfactory. This is just I'm just giving an example, but there are many things that we desire, and after some time we realize it did not really give satisfaction like we had expected it to satisfy us. So Bhagavad Gita teaches us that we need to be satisfied in all situations, not try to over endeavor, just trying hard to make a lot of money so that a lot of desires can be satisfied, because money cannot bring about happiness. So Bhagavad Gita teaches us simple living, high thinking. What is simple living? Simple living means we stay satisfied with whatever is necessary. You see, what happens generally is we don't go by what we need, but we go by what we want. There's a huge difference between need and want. So if we have a simple living and high thinking, what does high thinking mean? High thinking means that now that I have this rare human form of life, then let me become self-realized. Let me understand what is the purpose of human life. Let me understand who I really am. Where have I come from? What is the purpose? What is my goal in life? And where do I want to go from here after this life? So when an intelligent person starts inquiring, then the Supreme Lord helps that person from within the heart, guides them to take on this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Now we have seen that that this material world is temporary, definitely temporary, because we have seen even this material body is temporary. We have seen so many of our relatives, they are gone. They were there, they lived with us for some time, and then some of them are already gone. That means they have taken on another body. So that even this body is temporary. So Bhagavad Gita is teaching us that this is a material world, temporary. It is called Dukhalayam Ashashvatam. Dukhalayam means it's full of miseries, and Ashashvatam means it is temporary, which means happiness also is temporary. It has a beginning and it has an end. So it is important to understand that if this spirit soul, which is within this conditioned body, when it becomes self-realized, which means understands the purpose of life, then this soul does not take on another material body, but becomes qualified to go back to the spiritual world. And everything is there in the spiritual world. Now, material world is the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Sometimes it is seen, sometimes it's not seen, but the origin is the spiritual world, which is real and permanent. Now, material reflection of the real tree which is there, that can be cut off. Now, to do that, we have to understand the Vedic scriptures, and the essence of the Vedas is the Bhagavad Gita. Now, to be able to even understand the Bhagavad Gita, we need to do some practicals, right? Something practical, and that is called process of devotional service. Now, let me give you an example. We all have seen a rocking chair, right? Most of us, I'm sure, we also have sat in a rocking chair. Now, the rocking chair is rocking, 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 but it goes nowhere. It's in that same place. It goes nowhere. It is just there in that same place. So, whatever we do in this material world, it stays here. We cannot take it with us to our next life after death. It cannot go. Say, for instance, I have an American Express card. I also have a PhD degree. I also have $1 billion in my account. But after I leave this body, I cannot take any of that with me into the next life, into the next body. I have to start from scratch in my next body. So Krishna is saying that whatever is there here in this material world stays here in the material world. So why not we try to understand the purpose of human life? Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishto mataha smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedes cha aham ved. He's saying that Vedas, they are all, given by me. Krishna has given the Vedas. Vedantakrit Vedavid Eva Chaham. He says, I am the compiler of the Vedas and I am to be known from the Vedas. So the purpose of Vedic literature is to understand the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. And to do that, the first step is to do mantra meditation. I always talk about mantra meditation in each and every class of mine because that's a very intricate part of devotional service. Until and unless we do this meditation on a daily basis, we will not be able to understand the Bhagavad Gita. That is the very first step. So when we chant the holy names every day, then it becomes possible for understanding this knowledge and putting it into practice. Now, if we only hear the Bhagavad Gita, then it stays as knowledge. But when we put it into practice, like chanting the holy names, then it changes into realization. That is when we start becoming self-realized. So chanting the holy names helps us to conquer the weakness of our heart. The weakness of our heart is unlimited desires. So because in the heart, besides unlimited desires, there are also unwanted things like lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, illusion, so many things. It may be in small degree, it may be in large degree, but these unwanted things need to come out of the heart. The heart needs to be purified. A very nice example Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, that if there is a mirror and if that mirror is covered with dust, there's a lot of dust on the mirror, it is not possible to see ourselves in the mirror. Why? Because it's covered up with dust. But if we take a cloth and we cleanse that mirror, we remove that dirt from the mirror, then it'll be possible to see ourselves in the mirror. So that is the situation of the heart. The heart has become a little bit, there's a little bit of impurity in the heart. So to remove that impurity, it's important to do mantra meditation. When we do this mantra meditation on a daily basis, the heart starts becoming purified, and then the self-realization takes place. So this is a very simple way to somehow or the other purify the heart. I think Damaris has come for the first time, so I will post some links, and I'll also post the mantra that we will chant for a few minutes now. And it will be nice if all of you can also chant along with me. So towards the end of the chat, you will find the mantra, and I'll just chant for a few minutes to give you an idea how to chant, and it would be nice if you can chant with me. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So you see, I just chanted 10 times. These beads have 108 beads. Takes about 10 minutes to chant. So I would humbly request all of you to please chant if you're not chanting, and try to purify the heart as much as possible. So these sound vibrations are very, very powerful, and they help us to purify the heart. So I'm going to end the class now. If anyone has any questions,